This book and this moment are urging you to pause. The book that changed my life. Are you ready to start your new life? Are you ready to awaken to the purpose and the passion that's been waiting inside of you all along? Check out endevil.life. Evil is the destruction of freedom. I got the book.
This is the End Evil podcast, where we speak raw truth. The aim is to impress you about the value of your time on this planet, to shine a light on the most important truth that has been obscured for too long, to give you the information and knowledge necessary to make true change, to move human experience away from suffering and grief and towards love and joy. Let's begin to work towards the end of all evil. Every week, we dig into natural law, trauma programming, and the mechanisms of societal control. We replace ignorance with knowledge, fear with courage, and apathy with action. As Jeremy Locke said, evil is the destruction of freedom. Go to endevil.life.
So natural law is a set of universal, inherent, objective, non-man-made, eternal, and immutable conditions which govern the consequences of behavior of beings with the capacity for understanding the difference between harmful and non-harmful behavior. Funnel 5, a free 2-day online conference.
Ignite hearts and minds.
The event that will spark truth, love, and freedom.
February 21st and 22nd, 2026.
For more information, visit freedomundernaturallaw.com.
Hello and welcome everyone to Health Revealed. My name is Corey Angelot. I am joined by Stephanie Mo Davis, Scott Gordon, and Leslie Powers. Welcome back to our interview series where we will be sharing with you amazing guests and unique or untold perspectives to shift the current paradigm, to connect practitioners, health practitioners, practitioners in alternative arts as well. One we have today with us who is amazing, who I've been following for many years, is somebody that I think is going to inspire you and help you see a whole different world that you may have never considered before. From the micro to the macro, the individual to the collective, we aspire to connect the mainstream and the alternative, integrating these solutions. And we welcome you to participate in this whole project with us. Share your story and your resources. This is a fully independent project because we care deeply about our world. We believe that true healing and true freedom is possible. And in these interviews, I also want to provide you with practical action steps that you can take in your own life to better your own health. So without further ado, our fantastic guest is Mark Passio, an independent researcher, public speaker, internet talk show host, documentary filmmaker, technology seminar instructor, conference organizer, lead vocalist, and freedom activist from Philadelphia, PA. Mark has undertaken the task of assembling vast amounts of research in the areas of metaphysics, occultism, spirituality, symbology, and consciousness studies. He's most known, perhaps, for his work on the subject of natural law, which is actually how I found his work. And this is an in-depth seminar, as well as a feature-length film that he has based on that seminar called Mark Passio and the Science of Natural Law. You can find out all his work and very detailed seminars at markpassio.com or whatonearthishappening.com. So I'll head it over to Leslie.
Thank you. So glad that you joined us, Mark. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you so
on our
much.
show. Very glad to be here. It's going to be a very interesting discussion.
Yes, and I think we want to take this from the macro to the micro, and I'm going to start out with a more macro question. Um, as a clinical social worker and therapist, for over a couple of decades, when I found your work, I the most impactful thing for me was this awareness that there is evil in the world. And I think that a lot of people who come into healthcare fields are really have a very positive view of people. They want to see the good. And there's a certain naivete there. And we get very caught up in our little microcosm of our immediate job. And we don't always see the outside. We rely on government agencies to direct our work. There's a certain level of trust, And what really struck me was this recognition that there is a controlling class, that there is a malevolent agenda, and that really changes things when it comes to providing healthcare. And I wanted for you to maybe touch upon, what has given you that the confirmation to know for sure that there is this malevolent agenda, and that how are they doing this in the areas of healthcare and food?
Excellent question. And I would immediately say that my personal life experience showed me this, as opposed to coming to a conclusion through reading through large data sets or listening to someone else. And I feel that like personal experience really trumps almost every other form of knowledge, first of all. Um, I will often be called in the alternative research community or in the freedom community a conspiracy theorist. And I personally loathe and detest the term, especially when applied to me, because I've never been a theorizer of conjecture and just going off the cuff trying to come up with theories about anything. I'm a whistleblower, and I say that in my most of my recent interviews and work. Please don't group me in with people who are making crazy, lavish claims with little evidence to support it. And while I couldn't take you into the halls of power and show you what goes on behind the scenes myself, I think there is an ability to independently corroborate a lot of what I'm saying and have been saying over the last near 20 years publicly. So I have a background with people behind the scenes of power, not in the seated areas of seen power, politics, in other words. I have direct personal experience behind those corridors of power. That's the human puppet show, to show the human masses some fake conflict so that they can get all emotionally invested and make their identity a part of that. The level of evil and manipulative control over the minds of the masses of people that I was involved in definitely sits enthroned behind that ostensible seen power structure. I say it's beyond what people have now been traditionally calling the deep state. The deep state is the entrenched bureaucracy behind the scene, levers of power, if you will. But the level that I was involved in, I feel, is the absolute mind control architects is where these people are basically operating from, which is the world of the occult and occult societies. Basically, what you would ordinarily call secret societies, but it's a little bit more loosely organized into this network of people with the basic same goals and ultimately the same worldview and mindset. And when we're talking about like even people getting a handle on how these people operate and what their mindset is and what they're willing to do and the length that they're willing to go to achieve their agendas, I really think that the very first thing, if we're even going to start talking about health and healing, the thing that has to be worked on the most before we even get to any bodily healing or traumatic, healing from trauma, is worldview has to be worked upon. And if worldview doesn't come first, I harped on this in my recent shadow work seminar, because it constantly comes back to worldview healing. If you don't develop an accurate, non-naive view of the world and what is really going on and what's really operating here, it's sort of like an individual never psychologically grows up to become a true psychological adult. It's like they're still walking through life with blinders on and imagining the world to be a different way than it actually is. And what that is that's what psychological childhood is. Psychological childhood is this state of naivete where the individual wants to believe that the world is just a safe place and most people just have people's basic good intentions at heart, and want to help and don't want to do harm. And they just go along with this view of the world that is absolutely inaccurate and extraordinarily naive. It's a very naive, childish, psychological place to be and stay. And it's why it's one of the hardest things to explain to people, to even have a conversation about, because when someone does have direct firsthand knowledge or experience of this, or even has an accurate understanding of it from listening to whistleblowers and listening to people who have been involved, or just accurately doing years and years of dedicated research to come to the correct conclusions, you come across this psychological barrier of who wants to hear that they have been a naive child for the majority of their adult, chronological years. People don't respond too kindly to that. So it becomes like a butting of heads and a butting of egos, whereby you have to sort of try to formulate some type of a strategy. My strategy was very direct in my work. I'm going to lay things out in a very linear progression, but I start with consciousness and worldview. And if you really get a person to work on changing the worldview from a belief-based worldview to an evidence, fact-based worldview, number one, and reason and logic take preference over emotion and comfort, that's a hard sell for people, especially nowadays where we're so entrenched in a purely sensate society. And that's what the architects, that's what the cultural and social engineers, that they meticulously set about making a sensate society so people would only want to argue from their emotional standpoint and how they feel, instead of from an objective, factual based point of view. That's the worldview that has to change first. You have to develop a commitment to truth and reality, because there is such a thing and it's knowable. Not every single thing is knowable, but the truth about what's really going on in our world is absolutely knowable. The information is actually out there in a great abundance, in overwhelming abundance. A lot of people, they feel so overwhelmed by how much information is out there, they don't know where to begin, and that makes them shy away from it. So, that's where I would say that my knowledge came from. And if people want to look into, I'm not going to rehash my whole background, but if people want to look into that, obviously I've told the story many times of my involvement with the dark occult, or what you would call Satanism. I just call it the worldwide satanic network, if you will. People call this different names. I hate that term Illuminati that people always apply to it, because that means enlightened, and they're not enlightened. They're sick, psychopathic, evil people. And, I wouldn't apply that term to people of that mindset. I think the people who really are truly enlightened and higher consciousness, that should be reserved for them, not the sick psychopaths who are currently, unfortunately, running our world. So, I just call them the, mind controllers, the dark occultists, the sorcerers of consciousness, the satanic network. I think the network is just a perfect name for them because that's how they really operate. They operate like some sort of a spider web, this entrenched and interconnected network of different societies and organizations and think tanks and intelligence agencies. And it can be a lot to pick apart and try to even figure out structurally how it's organized. I don't really think that is important as understanding their mindset. Once you adjust your worldview to be able to encompass, wow, there are people who don't have our interest at heart. Not only that, they're trying to hurt us. I mean, they are in a lot of indirect ways. They're trying to hurt us. They want us to hurt ourselves through ignorance. They don't want us to understand about real health and vitality and a good psychology. They want us to be imbalanced. They want us to constantly be distorted and basically not congruent within our own selves, where we're battling ourselves. And let alone that, they certainly don't want us organizing and coming together and being on the same page, especially when it comes to morality and health. So
Yes.
that's my answer to that.
Thank you so much. So I have a question based on what you just said, and before we delve into like the nature of health and perhaps defining it, you mentioned worldview as being most important. So maybe we can kind of look at like an example, right? So you looked at Satanism and you're kind of critiquing it here. Well, there's a lot of Christians in the world. We say this is like one of the leading religions. So what about a Christian? And why did some of the Satanists that you were also like part of or associated with in the church, why did they go to Buddhism? And does this have any relationship with the worldview that you want people to go to or to be at within their own lives?
So, I've made no bones about it over the years. I think religion is essentially the one and only problem in our world. And I do not mean that Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam are collectively together are the one and only problem. That's not what I mean when I say the word religion. And I always have to basically give this working definition. I consider religion any worldview or mindset that is not in harmony with how reality actually functions, and when latched onto is going to hold people back from the understanding of how it really functions. So I think any religion is a mindset that holds us back from the understanding of truth. And there are plenty of other religions that are not grouped into what I call the world cultural religions, which we just listed. Religions are things like I believe that some people can have complete authority over other people and set rules for them called laws. I think religion is I'm completely identified with my role in society that I engage in to make money, my job, and that's my identity. I think religion is believing in political parties that are somehow going to save us from our own, mental and societal inadequacies. I think politics is a religion. I think greed is a religion. The love of money is a religion. People who make their world all about just, stacking up as much money as possible. I think comfort is a religion. I think the mindset of just constantly remaining in comfort and not challenging oneself and not trying to improve oneself is a form of religion. So the word religion encompasses a whole lot more than just the cultural ones. And people, generally need to understand that when it comes to my work, that's always my working definition. So I see all religion as the problem. But when it comes to working with people within cultural religions, I really don't have an issue with them. As long as someone is willing to discuss true objective morality, I'll sit down and talk with a Christian, a Jew, a Buddhist, a Hindu, a Muslim. It really doesn't matter to me what their cultural upbringing with religious beliefs are. That being said, do I think that those any religion is truly ultimately healthy or really in alignment with reality? No, I don't. I think out of all the cultural religions, I think there are very fallen mindsets within them. Certainly within Islam, certainly within Judaism, certainly within Christianity and others. And I would say out of all of those, if you had to put my feet to the fire, I would say Christianity is the least fallen out of all of those mindsets, but only because at its core is supposed to be a mindset of compassion and empathy toward others and treating others as you would want to be treated in the world. So because of that core principle of its belief system, I think it has still registers higher in consciousness than other religions out there. That being said, it is just as infiltrated and co-opted as any other religion. If people within any religion think their religion is unblemished and untouched and unadulterated and it's not co-opted, like they're literally out of their mind. You have to understand that as belief systems, they've been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and that's going to allow all kinds of manipulations to come into play by the social engineers of our world, and they manipulate those institutions like they do any other, and they're not untouched. They're not clean and untouched. So I did an entire 5.5 hour presentation called "Fake Ass Christians," where I attack the worldview of modern church Christianity, what I would not describe as true esoteric Christianity, but the traditions that are actually taught by the church-based institutions of Christianity, and talk about the ridiculous belief systems within it and how they really don't understand real morality. It's this is the very crux of spiritual health, is understanding what morality truly is and understanding the true difference between right and wrong. And you get the question all the time from people with a non-religious mindset, and even people with a religious mindset: how is one supposed to actually ascertain what the difference between right and wrong is? And, if you really understand natural law and you study it and you reason it out and you apply logic to it, you can work that out for yourself. It is available to be understood through the trivium methodology, basically applying grammar, logic, and rhetoric to it, and really developing a deep fundamental grasp of the true difference between right and wrong behavior. And in a nutshell, that is the basis of, again, spiritual health. I would say it becomes the basis of mental and psychological health as well. So, the basic difference is actions that are rights do not initiate harm to other sentient beings. Actions which are wrongdoings do initiate harm to other sentient beings. I mean, it's when you say it's so simplistic and elegant, it almost sounds ridiculous that people in our modern world still don't understand that basic truth and can't enunciate it. But that's basically the crux of what I would say is the nature of the problem, is that people have been given religions to dissuade them from the accurate understanding of true objective morality, and the religion gives them a pseudo morality. It gives them a morality as defined by the limited worldview and mindset of the religious institution and structures. It gives them a distorted version of morality that they then latch onto unknowingly, naively, and in all honesty, lazily, because they want the answer easily provided to them instead of really going off on a journey of truth discovery and truly discovering it objectively for themselves. They just want to be handed an easy answer. I've told people from day one, I'm not interested in people believing me. I don't want a cult following. I don't want followers. This is not a religion at all. That creeps me out, actually. I basically tell people like that, stay the hell away from me. That's a very creepy dynamic. I want people who are driven to investigate the truth for themselves and corroborate evidence and come to a logical and reasonable conclusion on their own through critical thought. And that's always been my intention. And that's what I feel really needs to be done is any form of mindset and worldview that holds us back to truth and the accurate understanding of real morality really needs to go. And that needs to be our work, is to get out of that limiting mindset and get into the mindset of more expansive consciousness, which allows us to truly learn and grow and discover true objective morality for ourselves, which is going to be the basis of all forms of health, ultimately.
Wow.
Mark, can you touch on the role of identity and its role in keeping people asleep and locked in particular holons and these religions as you're talking about, and really what the first step for an individual who's merged with their identity may need to do to start this process?
Yes, I talked about this a lot in my recent shadow work seminar, and I had a slide in it that said basically improvement to the self can often feel like death in many ways. I'm paraphrasing it, but that was basically the title of the slide. And when people really build a self, an attached self-identity from any aspect of what we basically go through and encounter and deal with in our world, they can totally identify in family, and then family becomes the all and the everything. And if my family disagrees, well, then it can't be true or right. Some people identify with their job, and I'm identify as a healthcare worker, and if my superiors tell me that this isn't the right path to look at or the right information to look at, well, then they just know better, and then I'm identified as that worker. Some people identify with politics. Some people identify with nationality. Some people identify with race. And, all of these things are just limitations for consciousness. They're there, and the social engineers just know how to exploit them. They know how to get people to latch onto it as if your very life depends upon it. And that's what really developing a deeply entrenched sense of identity based on those ideas or institutions is. It's basically a limitation of your consciousness. And if someone really wants to learn and grow and truly become spiritually and psychologically healthy, they have to be willing to allow that ego death process, or that at least it's not full ego death, it's ego identification death. Because that's really what we're talking about, is being ego identified, hardcore latching on mentally to a role or just an experience. Even like we could talk about like trauma, for example. So many people will identify with trauma. Right? Forget about even identifying as a family member, an American, a scientist, whatever, a doctor, a brother or sister, people absolutely and completely, want to latch onto ways of thinking. They want to latch onto being right. They want to latch onto even traumatic experience and then make that their identity. Instead of realizing that's something that occurred, that was an experience that happened. It's not who you are. A part of shadow work that I, went over in the recent seminar is you have to address trauma. Like you have to not ignore it, and you have to realize that you cannot normalize, issues and even pathologies that come up due to trauma. You can't just latch onto an identity as a victim or someone who was abused. You have to just, basically start the process of recognition that that's not your identity. So you set aside the your actual consciousness from the experience that you had. And it's the same thing when detaching from any other kind of constructed identity, because that's what trauma does. Trauma constructs false identities, because we're trying to deal with it in whatever way and whatever mechanism that the brain comes up with, if we're not dealing with it at a very conscious level and a level of really deeply reasoning it out and understanding the trauma. And instead of facing it, most people, they run toward one of those created identities because they feel safe in that. And that process of dissolving that is not easy. Like, not going to lie, not going to just tell people, oh yeah, it's easy. It's not easy. It's unbelievably hard work. But the payoff and the reward, if you do that work, is you're going to develop a whole new sense of self, and it's going to be way stronger. It's going to be way deeper. It's a deeper fundamental connection to the real inside of us, instead of these latched onto false identities that are created out of trauma, or just desire for safety, or just wanting identity, or just wanting belonging, because that's all those other things are based upon. There's no real genuineness there. People will insist, no, that's not true. This is real. This is genuine. But anything that's simply an experience, ultimately at a higher level of consciousness, is designed to hold someone in a box. It's designed to just keep their worldview, their head down, and their worldview just limited. And again, it all comes back to worldview healing and shedding personal entrenched ego identification is a gigantic part of that. I could not have left that out of the Shadow Work seminar, because that's such an important process.
Wow. Would you say your law of freedom, right? Freedom is equated to morality, also applies to health then in that case, based on what you've been saying?
100%. The more accurate we are, and this is why it's so important to have a truth discovery methodology and a mindset that cares for that and is dedicated to that. You can't just say, I'm going to try to work everything out through feelings. There has to be logic and reason, and we have to have almost a reverence for that. I would stop short of calling that a religion, but you got to have a deep founded respect for true knowledge and the understanding that reality is objective. It's our subjective perceptions that waver from reality. And what the human beings' work in life is to do is to make the best effort that they can to align their perceptions to the accurate objective reality that exists independently of our perception. So there is objective truth. It is discoverable through a methodology. And if you have respect for reality and knowledge, and I think if you don't, you're going to generate a lot of self-inflicted suffering. Knowledge is how we learn how to navigate the world and not do harm to ourselves and others in the process of that navigation of reality. So we have to first have the mindset that we are going to be able to, if we work hard at it and if we use logic and reason, to discover truth. That worldview has to come first before anything else. And, that's, I feel, what a lot of people, unfortunately, today are not doing. We're living in that sensate society where people are going in the opposite direction from alignment to health. They're not moving toward alignment to health. Ideologies like postmodernism and authoritarianism are leading people so far away from alignment with reality and truth. And that's going to distort everything that comes after that. If you're not in alignment with truth first, not only does morality go awry, health goes awry, freedom goes awry, all forms of wellness. So one of the things that you have to do is you have to really understand what health is, right? So if you don't understand what health is, if you don't understand what alignment to nature and reality is, then you're going to have a very difficult time moving forward. That's why it's important to have the basic definition. Health is general homeostasis within the self and the environment. It's not chaos. It's not disalignment. It's not dis-ease. You never, one of the parts of my shadow work seminar is one of the greatest mistakes that you could ever make is to normalize pathology. Because then what you're saying is this complete distortion and non-alignment to health and reality and nature is just fine, to just let it be that way. Or even worse, to confuse it with alignment to health. Like, that's the absolute worst thing you could do, because the more out of alignment with truth and reality and health you are, the more suffering you're causing, not only for yourself, but for others in the world. So truth has to come first. You got to heal worldview. And the worldview has to be healed in the sense that you know the truth is independent from your perceptions, and that it is possible with hard work to align your perceptions to truth with enough knowledge gathering, right? It's not just like believing whatever you want. So it's got to start there. And I would say that absolutely the law of freedom not only applies to human freedom through alignment to natural law-based morality. The basic law of freedom is, as morality increases in the aggregate, freedom increases in the aggregate. And as morality declines in the aggregate, freedom declines in the aggregate. So morality and freedom are in direct proportion to each other. And I, again, don't mean religious freedom. I mean true objective, not religious freedom, religious morality. I'm referring to true objective morality under natural law. So if you start there, then you're going to basically have the truth in hand regarding how freedom works and regarding how health works. And I would say the more accurate you are and the more knowledge that you have regarding how health really works, then that's going to extend outward into society as well and improve it. So health and the overall improvement of society, that's a perfect alignment of the microcosm to the macrocosm. Again, I talked about this in the shadow work seminar in the sense that the more you improve the self and make the self strong and healthy, the more society is improved, because we're all cells in that body. So you don't look at it like, oh, it's all just got to improve on the macro scale. You got to take up your role in that and, try to align yourself as best as possible when it comes to spiritual, mental, and physical health. When we do that, we're going to improve society tremendously in the aggregate. The more and more of us do that, and the more of us do that, the more we'll be in harmony with natural law and, creating aggregate freedom in the long term as well.
Mark, I got a specific question regarding this whole process. In the many religions, especially here in the West, will conflate self-work, self-love with a sin, that you should never be focusing on the self. And you hear this so often. And I want to see if you can explain or discern that nuance between being overly materialistic, overly selfish, influencer, with just literally doing the self-work upon yourself so you can work to heal and grow your soul. Can you speak on that just a little bit?
I almost find it hard to believe that that's a very predominant and prevailing worldview amongst those circles, that like self-improvement is somehow selfishness. And I'm not talking about self-improvement when it comes to just in the material sense. Of course, I'm absolutely just basically only referring to it in the internal sense. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't strive to create a nice environment for yourself and have the resources that you require. I would never begrudge anybody any of those things, and anybody that would is like, they're not psychologically balanced, because we need shelter and clothing and food and resources and be able to pay for, the bills that we have to all pay at the current time that we live in. I would never begrudge anybody those physical things, and that people should have them, and they should be able to live comfortably and shouldn't struggle for those basic necessities. I feel everybody should have that baseline of existence. But beyond that, like we have to look just beyond the physical. Like this isn't about just comfort. Obviously, I mean, I said that before. I think comfort is a religion that holds us back from the truth and holds us back from real health and real freedom. You know, gains are made when we put ourselves out of the comfort zone. But that doesn't mean that you can't focus in on what you require at the time. It doesn't mean there can't be self-care. There has to be self-care. Self-care is what will lead long-term to true self-respect, and that makes you stand up for your rights and not just accept tyranny and slavery. So yeah, of course there has to be self-love. I mean, it's a very naive and spiritually immature attitude on people's respect. I would feel sorry for anyone that thinks that way. And again, I would expect that definitely comes from some religious upbringing or religious thought process, sadly, that they have to look at that again from a different and healed worldview perspective, that only the being that is working upon healing and improving themselves can work on healing and improving the world and society, at large in general. We need strong, healthy people, and self-care is a gigantic part of that. If you have respect for the self, you want that. You don't want to stay in a state of degeneration or even mediocrity. Like I talked about these states, this is what the social engineers want. They want to put people into states of complete ineptitude and victim mentality and helplessness and shame and guilt and incompetence and mediocrity and degeneration. If you want to know the social engineer's mindset for the average person, that's it. That's where they want everybody trapped, because then everybody's dependent, and dependency breeds more tyranny and enslavement. The more you have people hooked on what you're feeding them, the more basically they're at your beck and call, and you can control them like a child's game. And that's where they have most people ideologically, sadly. That's the psychological state they have them trapped in. So we have to absolutely shed that mindset and develop true self-respect. Self-respect is the cornerstone of really wanting to have a better life and a better state of freedom for ourselves. It's like if people think what we're living in is anything resembling true freedom, again, their worldview is very skewed, because we live in a society based in authority and violence. You want to talk about things that people have to develop the self-respect to really come to an accurate determination of, that all forms of authority is a state of, I'll go to the most extreme perspective and say it's mental illness. The belief in authority itself is an absolute mental illness. It's beyond a religion. It's a cult-induced mental illness. Because imagine believing that someone else must obey the commands of others, even if they're not harming anybody else. Imagine someone saying that I'm the authority over you and I get to make the decisions for your life. You don't get to make those decisions through your free will. They have to be run through me first. It's like, well, then if you believe in that, you clearly believe that some people are the property of other people. I think that's the most reprehensible mindset that anyone could ever possibly imagine, because that's called slavery. And you want to talk about a state of complete disease. That you can't get any more disease than that. That's exactly what all forms of authority are in any world in this whole universe. That's all it ever has been. And the one thing that it's always backed up by is violence. And the people who believe in it believe that the world should be constructed and run through violence. And that's why I just tell people like that, you're not a good person. You're not a healed person. You're not a well person. You're a diseased individual. You're psychologically diseased. And more than that, you're spiritually diseased. And if you propagate that, you're spreading illness. That's the real contagion. I'm not worried about any virus getting me. I'm worried about mental contagion, getting the average naive, person out there who hasn't even considered reality and truth and doesn't even care as long as they're getting their paycheck and can live in their relative amount of comfort that they seek each day. We got to go beyond these basic necessities and life needs, and we got to look toward true internal improvement, real self-respect, real care for the truth, care for what is real morality, getting out of these subjective, religiously induced ideas about morality that just create more confusion, and really aligning ourselves to natural law and dedicating our lives toward real self-improvement and the freedom of our society. That's what the whole great work is all about. And those basic steps are the cornerstones for it, and self-respect and self-care are absolute cornerstones of building that foundation.
Hmm.
Mark,
Wow.
I'm wondering if you'd like to comment on the relationship between health freedom and human freedom. The
Absolutely.
people in the health freedom movement consider it quite a fundamental, and I've always thought it too, but I've never really understood how fundamental.
It's sometimes a hard sell to even people who are very interested in health and healing, just from a worldly perspective, to get them to understand how connected that is to freedom. The first step is, if you're going to make the decisions about what's going on with your health, your body, your life, the very first fundamental principle from which everything else extends is your life belongs to you. Your life is your property. Your body is your property. Without the understanding of bodily autonomy, and that your consciousness is yours, it's your property, it's not anybody else's property. My thoughts, emotions, and actions are mine. I'm responsible for them. And my body belongs to me. It's not the property of any other, because that would be called slavery. They could still make that claim all they want. It will never make it true in objective reality. All claims of authority are false, immoral, and not able to be backed up by any sense of truth whatsoever. They're untenable claims. So this is what we have to do first and foremost, is just set the basic ground rules that this is my property and not anybody else's property, and your body is your property and not anybody else's property. So once you understand true bodily autonomy, no one can force anything into or out of your body if you make the decision to put it there. If you don't want something in your body, if someone's trying to force it there, it's slavery, because they're making a claim that they have a higher authority of what to put in your body than you do. And I don't care what health crisis is going on. Someone has to acknowledge, I want that in my body. It's just, you could say the same thing about rape. If someone doesn't want a object in their body, and someone is forcing it into their body, it's rape. And more than that, it's a claim of ownership. As really, if you look at all of the transgressions, all of the ways that we can harm other people, it's all about claiming to own what you don't own. It's theft. And that's what all forms of immorality are. So the first thing you got to look at when it comes to any form of health is bodily autonomy and the property of the self. It belongs to the self. It belongs to no other. If you believe anything other than that, you're incorrect and immoral. And that's why it's so important to be correct. It's like, to get the right answers is critical. It's top of the list, right? It's like, we're not just talking about like spreading some nebulous, hazy ideas here. We're talking about concrete truth that is discoverable, and how important it is not to get that wrong. How important it is to be correct. That doesn't mean you keep doubling and tripling and quadrupling down when you don't have the data that you need to make the correct understand to arrive at the correct understanding. You actually have to be correct, and there's a process for that. It's gathering all the information. It's pouring through the information with all kinds of logical transforms that you could perform upon the data set so that you can actually understand what you are seeing in this huge body of grammar that you've gathered. And then after you sort through that extensively to understand it, then you could start acting upon it once the accurate understanding is in hand. Most people don't do that. They listen to little blips or sound blurbs or little snippets here and there, and then they try to reason everything out with their feelings instead of actually reasoning it out with the mind, organized logically and rationally with the trivium process in hand. So that's where health is totally connected to freedom. The ways that we think about health and the information that we gather when we want to come to an understanding about a problem with health, and then what to do about it, how to make an accurate diagnosis. Another concept I talked about in the shadow work seminar. If you're working on mental health, you got to diagnose problems. And if there's problems there, you don't ignore them. You tell the truth about them. And I mean hardcore. You tell brutal truth about problems, and you make accurate diagnostics. You have to learn diagnostics. You have to learn troubleshooting, right? So these are the foundations of all good health. It's the habits of good health is, number one, you have to gather the information, and you got to be accurate about it. You can't just be nebulous or working through feelings, right? Gather the data. It is possible to come to correct conclusions if you have enough data. The bodily autonomy is absolute ultra paramount. All right. You have to understand the property that is our body for each of us. Our consciousness is our property. So that comes to, if you want to put anything that is consciousness altering into the body, if you're doing that in a peaceful dynamic and you're not harming other people, doing that and then taking the action of harming somebody else, you would have to be responsible for that behavior, right? But if you're not doing anything harmful, you have the right to experiment with consciousness as you see fit. It's amazing to me that people who say that they want health, or say that they, basically are interested in the dynamics of self-health and self-care, don't often look at the dynamics that come involved, are directly involved with it, that are totally entwined with human freedom, such as bodily autonomy, such as the illegitimacy morally of the belief in authority and how that is based in violence. If you're somebody looking for health in all ways, again, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, you have to examine those concepts from a fundamental worldview perspective. I would say before you're even going to go into issues of the body, right? Get the mindset and the worldview straight first, because the mind-body connection is real. I talked about it again in the recent seminar. It is profoundly linked, right? If there's a problem going on in the mind, it's going to reflect in the body. Often, if there's a problem going on in the body, you're going to see mental imbalance as a result. It's a one-to-one direct connection, and it's a proportional connection. So these dynamics are totally related to human freedom, because again, as the individuals of a society are physically healthy, they're not going to be dependent on the state. They're not going to be dependent on somebody, quote unquote, taking care of them from cradle to grave, right? They're going to be responsible individuals. If people are mentally healthy, they can make informed choices. They understand the truth discovery method, and they can come to the truth, come to know the truth by employing it. And that's going to extend outward in society, where people are not easily manipulated. They're not naive anymore. They're not easily controllable. They're not fearful, right? A healthy mindset dispels fear because that's what knowledge does, right? By taking in knowledge and coming into harmony with truth, you're building a healthy mindset. This is something that is it would be a nightmare for controllers and social engineers if we had true mental health. And that's going to lead to true spiritual health and a true explosion in self-respect and self-care, and healing. That's ultimately what we're ultimately talking about. When I'm doing my shadow work seminar, I'm like, this is entirely about healing. And no form of healing is 100% perfect. There's no such thing as being done. It's a process that continues on. It's not like you arrive and you're there and that's it, I'm done. A lot of people think that's what shadow work is, or that's even what health is. It's a continuous challenge that you have to keep maintaining and working at and practicing. The dynamic of practice came into play constantly, where this is something that you practice every day, like you would practice shooting or baking or yoga or any other form of practice, or race car driving or bowling. Practice makes us less imperfect. I don't ever want to even use the phrase practice makes perfect, because that leads to the other concept when it comes to health and healing. There's no such thing as perfection. You can't strive for total perfection. You have to do the best that you can with the knowledge and information at your disposal in the current time. Be fully present, work to the best of your ability, start from where you're at, make improvements as you go, realize there's no such thing as total perfection. There's no such thing as 100% healing. It's more that when you're dealing with trauma and working toward healing, you optimize that, right? And you practice at dealing with it so that it doesn't overwhelm you or overtake you psychologically and emotionally. And when you practice those techniques to do that, and again, there's an infinite amount and variety of those techniques. I talked about several of them in the shadow work seminar. But when you employ those techniques of mental and psychological improvement, that's when you're really moving toward a state of equilibrium and balance and homeostasis, mentally, physically, spiritually. That's what real health is. And long term, that's what leads to real freedom. I just wish more people in the alternative health research community would become more direct advocates of true human freedom and understand objective morality and how it relates to human freedom more deeply. That would be one of my wishes. And I think a group like this that you guys have put together is a big spur in that right direction toward that.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I wonder if I could ask a little a more personal question.
Sure.
Because you've shared a lot in your podcasts about your own journey, about some health challenges you work to overcome, how the diet and nutrition changes of your life was one of the later areas
Yes.
of your transformation. And I'm just wondering if you might share, like, what helped you in that area of growth, and what do you do, in terms of maintaining health in your own life?
That's great questions. And I'll give you the answer that I've given many people, and I'll basically give credit where it is due. I feel that I was really very blind to what was going on in food and nutrition, especially what's going on in a corporate capacity and in an agenda-based capacity. Even though I had some involvement with dark occultism and what you might call social engineering, and being a part of that world for a time, I still did not have the grammar that I needed to understand what was going on with food. And it was, for me, the last piece of the puzzle that fell in place. I got all the other stuff, and I got this dynamic that we're discussing here today last, sadly. I wish it would not have been that way, but that's how it went. I developed diabetes. That is hence since under control due to diet and exercise. And there were, I was like at my height and frame, I should not be the weight that I was at my heaviest. I weighed about 230 pounds, around there, about 232 pounds. I am like 50 pounds lighter from that at this point. So it's like I feel like I really turned my health completely around. Again, first from a worldview healing perspective, then a physical one. Um, there's still a lot of things I'm working on to improve health, especially emotionally all the time. That's one I deal with continually, as I'm sure we all do, especially with the craziness of the things that go on in this world. But I'll tell you some of the most important things that led to my health transformation. And that is, I have to give credit where it's due to the individual that helped me the most as far as his information was concerned, and who I think people should really give a sincere and real chance to exploring his info, is Kevin Trudeau. And a lot of people, when they hear his name, they're like, oh, didn't he go to jail for some charges and fraud or whatever? He went to jail for contempt of court because they couldn't basically nail him on anything else. And they wanted to get back at him for basically breaking oaths to one of the societies that he was involved in, that basically has a whole lot of these social engineers and people behind these agendas. No doubt that the court system's intertwined in that, and they could arrange something like that, which is basically a complete, kangaroo court type scenario where the person is definitely not being dealt out justice, and it's flagrantly trumped up charges. But reading his best-selling book many years ago called Natural Cures They Don't Want You to Know, about, or something to that effect. It was just the most balanced perspective on nutrition that I have read. And it never takes an extremist point of view. And when I've heard the man talk, I knew from my background, I tell people this all the time. I feel like I have I'll call it occult dar, okay, instead of radar, right? It's being able to tell when someone is an occultist. And my occult dar is very on point and accurate. And hearing Kevin Trudeau speak, not knowing that he was involved in any secret societies or occult networks, I was able to pick out that this guy had occult knowledge. Hearing him speak for like 15, 20 minutes, that's all I needed. And I said, no doubt about it, this guy was involved in the occult in some capacity. I didn't know how. I certainly had no firsthand knowledge of his involvement. I listened to more of his podcast years ago before he ever went to prison. And, he told the story eventually. I came across a podcast where he recounted the story where he was involved in a secret society network called the Brotherhood. And it is a very real institution known as the Brotherhood of the Great White Brotherhood of the Snake, or the Serpent. It's a very old secret society, actually, that basically can trace its lineage back many, many thousands of years and continues on in the modern day in different forms. And he was a member, and he basically worked with a lot of people that were involved at a very high level, like a CEO level. He talks about his discussions and, I guess, somewhat of a friendship he developed with the CEO of Kraft Foods and other people high up in the food industry. Big, agra and big food. And, he was saying in some of his perspectives, yes, there was a very deliberate agenda. And in others, the people thought they were just, being able to ramp up production and improve shelf life and get better distribution out to people. And in doing those things, they were harming health. But his book was probably the thing that woke me up to what's going on with food. And he broke oaths to bring that information forward. Pissed off a lot of people, cost corporations billions of dollars, made other food entities like have big demands put on them to have higher quality and standards and organic food, etc. It led to a chain reaction of events. Hence, he was railroaded, put in prison for 10 years, did the whole sentence last year on apparently on an ankle bracelet under house arrest. But looking at his information, it was the most balanced perspective. And if you're an extremist about food and health and you're on these kicks like, oh, this food is just never to be consumed, and it's not that. There's no fad stuff. It's very simple, good habits and practices. See, that's what I'm about, right? One of the things that he said continuously, and it's a hallmark of an occult mindset, is improvement is what you do most of the time. It's all going to be about what you do most of the time. What is your habit? What is the practice you are employing continually on a daily basis? What have you habituated? So have you habituated good practice, or have you habituated bad practice, right? It's all about your habits, right? And this is what practice of any form of self-improvement, like health or mentality or spirituality, that's what it is. It's about what you do most of the time. What's your habit, right? So he instilled that in me. And I feel like those two things together, the information he brought forward and how powerful that was, and then the idea of you don't strive for perfection here. You strive to set good habits and habituate them daily, right? And if you falter, you falter. And you don't beat yourself up endlessly over it, no more that you beat yourself endlessly up for trying to do, mental self-improvement. You pick yourself up, you get back on the horse, and you keep going forward, right? It's the same thing with any kind of true self-improvement, and it applies to health in the same way. Let me tell you the one supplement that I found that I could never not take, that like once I discovered what this supplement did for me, and maybe I had some sort of an imbalance with the thyroid, as many people do, and it often goes undiagnosed and we don't realize that we're having thyroid problems. Nascent iodine 100% turned my health and vitality completely around 180 degrees. It was like a magic potion. And I say that about nothing. I say that about very few things. I'm sort of been experimenting a lot with methylene blue lately, and I have very good results with that as well, and have taken it for actually many years, just much more reliably over the last year and a half or so. But nothing was more profound than a daily recommended dose of nascent iodine every day. I've been taking nascent iodine daily now for at least the last 15 years. And I mean, I don't miss a day. Okay. It radically restructured my energy. One of the other ones that I'll say I think is very good and successful is a 5-MTHF, a 5-methylfolate. It's mitochondrial support. And this is a lot of an issue for many people that again goes undiagnosed. Thyroid issues, mitochondrial issues, which is where the energy is produced in the cell. If you can improve those two areas, I think it's a basic kickoff point. And I think people would see that if they first obviously do research, make sure this is something that you're ready to experiment with after you've gathered enough knowledge. Obviously, nobody here is going to give any medical advice. It's just putting information out there about supplements that are widely available, are actually really not that expensive, that you can get in a pretty clean form in today's world. And those are the things I saw the most radical improvements. It was the information, number one. You got to get it right here first, right? And then those two supplements. I can't recommend Kevin Trudeau's work to people enough. Regardless of anything else you want to think or have heard or see, I'm not speaking about every single aspect of an individual. I'm saying his information from Natural Cures, absolute top notch, phenomenal as far as I'm concerned, right? And it's a balanced perspective. It's not one of these. I'm not an extremist when it comes to food. I'm just not. I don't say it's all this way and that's it, and oh, you have to do this exact diet. I don't go down any of those pathways. I try to, I think the best and most sound, logical, reasonable approach is eat as close to nature as possible. You know, what comes from the earth is generally supportive of us and our health and life, and the sun, in conjunction with the earth, produced that. And, you eat as close to that as possible. Try to keep ultra processed stuff away. A lot of people go into all kinds of stuff when it comes to sugar and water and carbs and fat and all. It's like I don't really think anything that's natural is bad as long as you're not abusing it, right? Don't abuse things, just use them as, nature intended. Stay in balance and you'll stay in homeostasis. I take a very common sense approach. I don't support or propagate any fad diets or extremist claims about any particular foods. You hear every single day, you hear a different thing. Carrots are bad for you, broccoli's bad for you. I heard some new thing. I don't know, like don't take vitamin C. It's like, look, I get that people are always looking to hear whatever the new trendy thing is, but you know, it's very simple. Um, Eat as close to nature as possible. You know, keep processed foods out of your diet to the extent that you can. Keep refined sugars out of the diet. Supplement your diet, like, because we're not getting everything we need through food. So I think supplementation is phenomenal, and I think it's one of the things that I've really amped up. I take probably 30 supplements every day, and powders, a lot of powders that I cap myself. I think buying very clean, from, maybe some bulk supplement supplier that is trusted and really does a lot of laboratory, research to make sure their product is pure, and capping it yourself with a pill capping machine, like a 000 capping machine. That's done wonders with my health and energy level as well. So I'd recommend buying in bulk and buying capsules and capping yourself for many supplements. Others, you could just buy them already capped. I did some research and crunched some numbers, and it's like I'm probably paying 8 times less, 8 times less than I would be if I just bought all the supplements that I basically buy as pure powders as I can find and then cap them myself. I think that's kind of a life hack there that I would throw out there. And yeah, I'd say those are the things that have helped me the most. It's a general common sense approach to food and nutrition, understanding the agendas behind the big corporate, food push and how it's created ill health. And getting on some good supplements and supplements that really restored energy and vitality and proper function. So can't recommend nascent iodine highly enough. Can't recommend 5-methylfolate enough. Can't recommend methylene blue enough, quite frankly. And just taking that very common sense approach and taking that approach of just put one foot in front of the other, make small incremental improvements until you habituate it as a good habit. And it's what you do most of the time. And if you falter, don't beat yourself up too badly. Just keep going.
Yeah. Well, Mark, I'll tell you this, diet was one of the biggest things I shifted when I was 13, and I think it led me to your work. So I think
Nice.
it goes both ways, right? Once you start, like you said, with this sort of psychosomatic mental worldview work, you can lead yourself into diet, or you could fix your diet and fix your health, and then eventually you start to open your mind. You're like, whoa, what's
Yes.
going on? And so I think it can go both ways because just as you demonstrated before, it's this law of freedom, the law of health. These two are equated with morality.
Absolute 100% correct. Couldn't have said it any better. Absolutely.
Leslie, you had a question, perhaps?
Oh, I was just thinking about omega-3s. I wanted to throw that in there because it's really
Yes.
important for brain health, and a lot of mood disorders can be actually extremely helped by taking omega-3s. And there's, vegan sources if people
Very important.
prefer that.
I take vegan sources of that every day as well. I supplement with that. If you want to talk about any specific supplements or approaches, I'm open to discussing that a little bit. That's definitely another important supplement. I supplement a vegan B12 every day as well. I think all of those are incredibly important. A B complex is important too. I think that vitamin C in an absorbable form is ultra healthy. Juicing. I mean, I have to say one addendum to what really helped me get in a better frame of mind and bodily framework when it came to health, and that is juicing, fruit and vegetable juicing. It's ultra important. Most people don't do it because of the time investment to do it. But I have to say that the individual who helped me there the most was Jay Kordich. Uh, Kordich, I believe he spells his last name. Jay Kordich, I consider one of the fathers of juicing, and just fantastic techniques and combinations, and again, very sensible, common sense approaches when it comes to using a juicer. I had his brand of juicer years and years ago. I've since switched over to like a Breville brand one, and I also have like a slow auger juicer as well. I don't recall the brand name, but Jay Kordich, who has unfortunately since passed several years ago, I think really helped me to understand health and nutrition through juicing as well. Um, I think Dan McDonald has done a lot of great work with juicing. He calls himself the Life Regenerator, has put out wonderful videos on specifically green juicing for health and for detoxification of the body. Would highly recommend his work as well. So there's a few names, added as addendums, and absolutely juicing is juicing and blending, critically important. Get a good juicer, get a good Vitamix. I find Vitamix great blenders. Use it every day. I use the dry blade container of my Vitamix for actually grinding some things. I just ground some Heishu Wu today. It's called Foti is another name for it. It's an adaptogenic root bark. I bought it, in these big chunks and prepared so that you could just grind it up and cap it. Threw that in my Vitamix dry blade. I mean, I got such a fine powder grind on it. It's going to cap beautifully, So uh, that you just have to take a daily investment in your health. Put an investment into some supplies for your kitchen. You know, take common sense approaches. That's what led to the general state of health that I've arrived at. And again, nothing is perfect. We all have to continuously make improvements. But I try to eat a healthy plant-based diet, supplement my diet, do juicing and blending. When I'm done with this interview, I'm gonna go make a smoothie.
Me too,
I'm gonna go
actually.
make a strawberry, blueberry, banana smoothie with some
Yeah.
vanilla protein powder in it.
Yeah.
And that's
It
gonna
was,
be my lunch, my late lunch.
yeah, it was listening to you that I was inspired to juice watermelon and,
Oh, so good.
cantaloupe. And like, yeah, you were right. It's so good. And I just wanted to draw one final like link between like self-respect and trauma healing to valuing one's health and taking the action steps, right? And there is a certain degree of sacrifice in this. And I see people stop eating organic, stop buying these things to save money, and where the economics comes in, that this becomes one of the first areas people sacrifice. And for me, I really went the opposite. I was like, no, I am going to invest my money where my values are and in my value of health and my value of self, and, buy the supplements and the blender and and the organic food. And I do think that it is important in our alignment our internal alignment, that we start reflecting on that. Yeah.
Critically important. I mean, that's your investment. If you want a payoff, if you want a reward at the end, you got to make the proper investment,
Yeah.
and there's a little bit of risk that comes with that, as there is with anything in life. But, without that risk, there's no reward on the investment. So make the investment, take it seriously, put the resources that are necessary behind it, and you're going to see the yield, the payoff in the long term. Obviously, that requires habituation of good practices, as with anything else, to become good at. But you do those things, you're going to see the payoff in the long term.
Thank you,
Mark.
Mark.
If I can ask you, the
Sure.
importance of relationship and your close surroundings of your tribe that you hang out with, and how important that is for your health.
It's very important, and obviously, mine is selective, and it's few. So I feel like, in order to try to limit drama and chaos, I try to keep that selective. That's how I would word it. Some people will see that as, that means you're cutting yourself off, or not, taking advantage of whatever opportunities. It's like, I don't really see it that way. I definitely value quality over quantity. At the same time, I've moved out from the city to the suburbs. It's a drastically different social dynamic, where it can get, a little bit lonely at sometimes. I try to be a social creature as much as possible. I think that's a big part of health. A lot of people take that for granted and don't, see to that dynamic enough. But it's maintaining relationships is very important and difficult, because we're complex creatures, and a ton of different angles and dynamics can butt up against each other, and cause a headache sometimes. And what we have to do is all work together to try to be on the same page about general health, be on the same page about what the long-term goals are, right? And then that's when you can work together and develop a synergy. And again, it's all mindset has to come first, right? Mindset has to be there first, where you're saying that you're going to establish a good habit and try to leave bad habits in the background. And if we're in a positive and healthy and sustained and nurturing relationship, then I think all parties are going to be interested in those long-term goals, and want to achieve them, and move the needle toward them. So that's what I would say about relationships, and basically being selective about choosing the people around you, because some people won't build that. Some people will, detract. You have to really be selective and try to choose the right people, and choose quality individuals over quantity, just because, the alternative may be a little bit less of a road traveled upon with compatriots, if you know what I mean. So that's my take on, relationships and health.
I just have one last question, and that is, like all of us here, I think we're pretty serious folks, and we care a lot about the world, and we can be intense and really obsessed with researching and doing this work. One thing about you that's been really attractive over the years is your really radical transparency about your own process. So one of the reasons why I don't trust most healthcare professionals, because they're very untransparent about their own process and the things that they go through. There's just this boundary and wall, but your ability to really be honest and talk about the stuff that's even not so light and fluffy, you just really throw it out there. But
thank you. I appreciate that. I'd like to say, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for, living in the world that we do, I think people are having a big trust issue. And I think one of the first indicators whether or not you feel you should discern whether to trust somebody or not is their ability to actually be honest in the face of their own shortcomings. If you can't do that, then I think that's a red flag of, whether or not I can trust this person.
Should be so simple, right? Like, why would I bother to try to hide stuff? Like I like who I am. I'm proud of the progress that I've made. That doesn't mean I think I'm perfect. God knows I'm not in any way, shape, or form perfect, but I've put in my work. I continuously put in my work to try to improve and better myself. I try
It's
to hold
evident.
yeah, thank you. I try to hold other people to that same standard as well. And influence self-betterment and improvement. And I just feel like I want to be open about it, right? If I'm not doing something well, I'll probably be the first person to tell you I'm my own worst critic. I'll probably be the first person to say I dropped the ball on this. I don't really think I just don't want to lie about myself. That's the first occult dictate. That's it. Just the first maxim of all the mystery traditions of consciousness throughout all human history is this above all, to thine own self be true. Be honest with yourself. Don't lie to yourself. That's all. It's really not that difficult of a process. Just you don't have to be ultra hard on yourself. You got to be a little hard on yourself, but just as is always said when it comes to self-improvement, you're not competing with anybody except yourself from yesterday, right? Just try to be better than that. Try to not just slip and degrade, right? Just keep moving on the uphill. One of the things I talked about in the shadow work seminar is when if we have to gauge our progress, and I think we do, like you got to grade yourself, right? You don't just do this stuff and be like, oh, however it works out, it works out. There has to be an objective standard of sort of grading your progress. And it doesn't mean like you're like totally obsessed with that. It just means like, or do you know you're moving in the right direction and getting better instead of worse, right? So, I talked about in one part of the seminar, like when you're gauging your progress, you don't have to have this super steep line where, oh my God, that shot so far up in so little time. It's like practically, it's logarithmic. You don't need there doesn't have to be that kind of crazy fast improvement, right? If it happens, that's wonderful. Take it as a win, right? But it's like, hey, this is great progress over time. Even this is good progress over time. Even this is good progress over time. Just don't flatline, and certainly don't go like this, right? Just don't flatline and make no progress over time, and don't degrade over time. Just make steady uphill progress over time and you're good. You'll get to where you need to be in general, right? See, this is why I say I take this common sense approach. So many people try to put too much too fast. Do too much too fast. I'm going to quit this cold turkey. I'm going to radically change this. Then what they're doing is they're stirring a whole bunch of things up in the body. And then they're like, oh my God, why do I feel sick? Why do I feel completely off? Why is this not working? And it's like, you're doing too much too fast. The body actually requires gradual change, especially the body. The mind is actually way more plastic and flexible than the body is. The mind, although it gets very calcified, it can change on a dime. Somebody can change their worldview and their perspective by just hearing the accurate information and be like, wow, I never thought about it like that before. I never heard it spoken of like that before. The body, when you get into habits with the body, time is going to be required to adjust and undo bad habits and then habituate good ones. I would never tell anybody radically change this ultra fast. That's a recipe for disaster. I want to see society change real fast. Would I want it to be so colossally fast that like it's so chaotic that it actually creates more suffering? No. The mind would have to adjust. People would have to adjust behaviors. I think it could happen very fast if the mental adjustment is made. But as with something complex system, it would require some time, and we'd have to give it some time. And the body definitely needs time. I'm not one of these extremists of cold turkey approaches or radically quick shifts in habits. Start with small incremental changes. Get comfortable with them, habituate yourself to them, improve steadily over time. Very common sense. That's an occult perspective, quite frankly. Occultists will teach you that. Okay. And, that's where my information and the path that I'm trying to put people on is a path of self-discovery, self-improvement, and self-initiation into deeper levels of awareness and consciousness. It's part of the esoteric traditions over time. It's where I draw from. I take an integral approach. Once again, just like with food and nutrition, I don't do extremist stuff. I don't do like one hardcore tunnel vision. It's a very wide open and eclectic array of information and approaches, and then you integrate them. It's called the integral approach. And again, that's what I said was my approach to shadow work. It's my approach to health as well. We need an integral and eclectic approach to this information and these practices.
Wow. Thank you. And I'll tell you right now, one of the most appealing reasons why I watched your natural law seminar is because of how you broke it down like a practitioner, and you even defined what the word diagnosis means through way of knowledge. And it was very appealing because you brought it from that academic perspective that, some people get mad at you for your anger. And I'm like, I'm looking at the information. I'm like, there's so much rich knowledge in here, And I find it profound because we can learn from everybody and all these things that happen to us too in our lives. And people go through all sorts of traumas. And I talk to now people on the streets, but you're right. I'll try to go to some church like I shared with the group yesterday. I went to some church group and it's just like, I can't do it. Every time I try, there's a blockade somewhere in their mind. And I find it very interesting, though, because I expose myself to that on purpose because I want to understand more of their perspective. I'm not trying to create an echo chamber, hide myself away from the perspective I'm trying to understand. And among these lines, if you don't mind, I have a final question, and I know everybody else had like a final question. So this one's a little bit complicated, but I think it's important because of your recent work on shadow work and what we see within online communities and among influencers, and yourself now, you've created a bit of an influence, on the online spaces per se. Though I want you to always, of course, share the truth and be honest, regardless of numbers. And that's the way I look at it too. Like you said, any progress is progress. And that's why I've been doing this all day and all night for the past, 4 or 5 years. But tell me if I'm wrong, right? So there's a lot of nuance. We have to see the bigger picture. And that helps us expand our consciousness. And we have to continue to challenge ourselves as I demonstrated. So when we're sharing the stuff about natural law or objective morality, what I've noticed and I've observed in myself and in other people who've studied this work is it definitely helps us see the ideologies that we've fallen into, whether it was government, religion, etc. But because we were in such a mindset that was so dogmatically attached, we could look for another attachment and not actually do the inner work. So is there the scientism or left brain attachment to objective morality and natural law? Because even in your seminar, you say natural law is harmonized over time and that we're continually learning and that there isn't a truly perfect. And although we might say the natural law itself is perfect or the truth is perfect, our perception isn't, because like you showed the wavelength, we have to over time try to align our actions, our beliefs to it. And so there's also this identification, right? I'm an anarchist, or I'm a vegan, or I'm a natural law teacher. When in reality, we might want to embody the principles more than, speak or merely display. You mentioned in some of your seminars, natural law is the only solution. And I think these are just nuances to look at. I'm not trying to blame you. I'm blaming the followers of you. Because maybe you've seen it in your own community. I just want you to be honest with me and tell me if you have. But I've noticed I grew attached to it when I first came across it. And I was speaking word for word everything that you were sharing. Natural law is this is that. And although, because I love that framework and it made it really easy to understand, over time, through teaching it and through practicing it and through talking with other people, I developed my own approach. I still agreed with the premises, but I found other ways to portray it. So going further into this, you said you don't want a cult following, and I mentioned the attractiveness lures us in, so it can create a cult-like mentality among your followers, and it's not your fault. But I had to develop my own worldview, and so then you see voluntarism, self-ownership. You look at Larkin Rose, he doesn't define morality specifically, Lysander Spooner, C.S. Lewis, he compiled a bunch of natural law teachings through all the ancient traditions and said, look, they all share this common trend, but they don't have a specific definition. This idea of first principles or the golden rule is not really a definition, but a rule. So am I wrong to sort of see this bigger picture? Am I missing something here when I'm kind of not using this objective morality framework, although I'm still applying and embodying the message within my life?
No, I don't think there's anything wrong with that approach at all. I mean, you're just coming at it from a slightly different perspective and, maybe working with slightly different methods. And I don't see any problem with that. I think there should be diversity and styles when teaching information like this. And, many different people will bring different dynamics to the table. Again, like you said, Lysander Spooner may explain it one way, Larkin Rose may explain it according to just looking at the dynamic of authority and how that's not, in any way keeping with what it means to be a good and moral individual. And, I'll take it more from an esoteric and occult perspective. I don't think there's any right or wrong way of dealing with that or fleshing it out. I think the more eclectic those perspectives and approaches, the better, quite frankly, because then people are going to be hearing that from a ton of different angles and perspectives, and it'll probably help open their minds in a better way and possibly in a faster way. So no, I don't. I'm not an extremist like that either, and I did not tell people to go out and sort of create some sort of an extremist religion regarding the work that I have put forward, nor do I want to ever see it degenerate into anything like that. So, I think what you're talking about is a general, well-balanced and common sense approach, which is what we've been talking about the entire interview. And that's what I favor in just about all areas of life.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I don't know. I just wanted to give that question because I feel like I don't know if I would have had the chance to ask you outside of this. So I wanted to really say thank you for joining us in this whole interview and for sharing your thoughts on health. Guys, do you have any other reflections, things you want to share? And yeah, I think it's amazing to see this community, the natural law ideas continue to grow. I've become just very wary of my own attachment to it because I had this sort of ego to it, I think, where it's like, I'm right, you're wrong. And it's like, because I know I'm right because I have this definition. And I think those are like the extremes to where we can sometimes actually cause more problems when we're trying to share the solutions. And it's a bit hard to navigate, but I think your work with shadow work and what I'm trying to do too is like the self-discipline and looking at opposites and nuance will help us with that true discovery process.
Yeah,
and not everybody's going to be,
true.
the most advanced.
Right. You got to take it on a case by case basis with people, especially if you're dealing with them in person. And I think just putting information out into the world and archiving it for future generations is ultimately very, very, very important. That's how we propagate knowledge. But I think, yeah, in person especially, take it on a case by case basis. See where, try to maybe gauge or get a little bit of a feeling for someone's ego attachment and identification, and then speak to them, from the heart from there. Again, it can be difficult. Sometimes I will choose to do that, and sometimes I'll choose to say, maybe not today, and maybe I should err on the side of sometimes just letting people be for now until they're ready for something more substantive. They have to want that self-improvement. They have to want that self-respect, and they have to want to be doing that self-care work to generate real health and real freedom. And that's what it's ultimately all about. And again, we can take that on a case by case basis and have a lot of different eclectic approaches to teaching that and helping to propagate that. So one of the things I just want to say is thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for you guys putting together a dynamic group like this to do this kind of work, because including and incorporating real health into the dynamic of human freedom, and teaching all of this from that incorporated and integral perspective is extremely important work. So this is a great project, and I wish you the best with it.
Thank you, everybody. MarkPassio.com, whatonearthishappening.com. Check it out. Shadow Work Seminar is one of your latest works. And any other announcements you want to make as the final note?
I have How to Become the True Media coming up, where I teach potential content creators who want to like kind of break into the content creation field and teach natural law to how to do that work from the technical perspective. So it's a technology seminar about how to become a content creator. If people are interested in that, they can visit howtobecomthetruemedia.com and enroll. The classes are go from January all the way through June of 2026. Enrollment is still open until the end of this month. I think I close enrollment on January 1st. So people still have plenty of time to enroll in the 2026 How to Become the True Media seminar if they so choose. And if you want to look at all of my information that I've put forward over the years, my main website is whatonearthishappening.com. And if you want to check out other great content creators, such as everyone right here in this interview, check out onegreatworknetwork.com, and you'll see a bunch of content from many, many great content creators out in the world at that website. So there's all the info people need. And thank you very much again, guys. Really enjoyed it.